Guys, what's going on? Tom here, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be discussing a bunch of things that beginners need to know before jumping into the fish hobby. Now, the reason people need to know this stuff is because it'll make your life so much easier. It'll make your life a billion times easier when it comes to keeping fish. And these are all things that I really did not consider when I jumped in the fish tank hobby, as I just jumped in one day because I saw that a tank was on sale. So throughout the video, I'm going to be listing a bunch of things that you should consider before buying yourself a fish tank, along with some of the supplies you will need, or some of the supplies that I have used throughout keeping fish that have worked and that have made my fish's life a lot better inside the tank. So throughout the video, I'm going to have subtitles to show you guys what we are discussing. I'm also going to have little video clips of what I do and some of the things I have messed up on and some of the things I have broken while doing the fish tank hobby. But one of the most important things we have to establish before we even go into those topics is that fish are live animals. Just like a cat or a dog, these fish require space, and oftentimes they require a lot of space. The reason they require a lot of space is dependent on the fish and their nature and their size. Some fish need a lot of space because they're very aggressive. So with more space, the other fish can go, hey, I'm gonna go over here, you go be mad over there, I'll stay over here, and everything will be cool. Some fish just get really big. And for some fish, like a goldfish, they poop a lot and they create a lot of ammonia. And they need a lot of space in order to dilute said ammonia. So make sure before you even go on to the next part of the video that you understand that you're not going to be able to keep every fish in the pet store, like just based on tank size. If you want to keep a lot of fish, the best size tank is probably a 55 gallon, but we'll get into that later on. Just remember that fish are live animals, and just like a cat and a dog, you gotta accommodate their needs. You can't be shoving some of these fish into small tanks like I did early on, and it ended up killing a lot of my favorite fish. So enough of that, let's actually get right into the video and onto the first subject that we need to consider when we're buying your first fish tank. Now we get onto the size of the fish tank. Now you'll see in a lot of these stores that they sell a lot of these smaller tanks, and I would say stay away from those tanks. Smaller tanks are more difficult to take care of than bigger tanks, and not to mention in smaller tanks you can't fit a lot of fish in there, and when you first jump into the fish hobby, you're going to want to have more fish and less stuff. You want a lot of fish in your tank. So when going out to buy your first fish tank, you need to consider the size. The bigger the better. More water equals more dilution. It'll be easier to take care of the water. The water levels won't sway back and forth. You won't have toxic water from all the poop from the fish. And the bigger tank just allows you to keep more fish. It allows you to keep different fish. It allows you to keep more of them in quantity. Like, let's say, you get a 30 gallon, you could shove guppies in there like crazy. You could have like a bunch of guppies. It'd be insane. But if you have a 10 gallon, you can't have that like too many guppies, because then your water levels are gonna go sway back and forth, and the water will end up just not being great for the fish. So when starting out, I started out with a 10 gallon. And I very quickly noticed that the 10 gallons are not so great, because I made a lot of mistakes in my first tank. I put 2 goldfish in a 10 gallon, which off the bat is a thumbs down, because, they poop a lot and they make that water so bad. It is crazy. And then after that, I put in an angelfish, and that was a very, 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 very bad move, because there is no way an angelfish can live in a 10 gallon tank, and I learned that the hard way. I ended up losing one of my favorite angelfish that I had my first one, because my tank stunted his growth, but his insides kept growing, and then he ended up dying. So don't get a 10 gallon. Do not get a 10 gallon unless you're into keeping betas and guppies. If you like those two, which are very colorful fish, very active fish, for the most part, betas can be housed with a bunch of fish. I've had my beta with neon tetras. I've had him with about 14 of them, and he had no problems. Guppies are very colorful as well and very active, and they're also community fish. They also have a lot of babies. Watching the babies grow up is very cool too. So unless you're going to keep those guys in a 10-gallon tank, I would suggest going with a 20. A 20-gallon tank will allow you to keep angelfish, while most people say, you should have a 30. You should have a 30. So if you get a 20 and you have 2 angelfish in there, that's about it. Don't put anything else in there because then the angelfish are going to get mad. But I have seen angelfish thrive in 20 gallons. I've actually seen a bunch who have preferred 20-gallon tanks over the 30 for whatever reason. So if you want to start fish tanks, I would suggest something around the 20-gallon mark, unless you're only into keeping betas and then fancy guppies. You can go down to the 10-gallon, but just a warning, keeping those tanks clean is going to be very difficult. So the bigger the tank, the better. More fish you can keep, better water. That's pretty much it with the size of the tank. So next is the placement of said tank. So now we've picked your tank. We're going to say we picked a 20-gallon tank. Now, what you need to consider is that 20-gallon tank is going to have water in it. And how much does water weigh? Well, water weighs quite a bit. I like to go by 10 pounds per gallon, even though I only believe it's about 8. I like to go 10 pounds per gallon, only due to the fact that it'll make me think more critically about where I'm putting it and making sure whatever platform I'm putting it can withstand the weight. As you guys can see on the screen, I ended up cracking my table with my 10-gallon because I didn't think about placement. I'm just like, oh, I have a TV stand. This thing held a TV. This thing could totally handle, a tank. So I put the tank on there, put some rocks in there, fill it up. And within a couple months later, I emptied the tank. I did a massive water change. I moved it, and my table just cracked. Now, the tank is still on that table, but it's just kind of pushed over to the side because, the rest of it can't hold it. I just put more pressure on the middle support, but we got to make sure that you guys know where you're putting that tank, and you got to make sure that it can hold the weight, because guess what? It may give out, and the last thing you want to do is crack the fish tank that you just spent $115 on and then lose all the fish inside of it and ruin whatever platform you had it on. So make sure whatever you put your tank on can withstand the weight. Go by 10 pounds per gallon so that you guys can be safe, and make sure that whatever platform you're putting it on can withstand the weight. You also want to avoid direct sunlight, and I'm going to tell you why. Algae will grow like mad if it has sunlight and light. So when we buy a fish tank, we'll probably end up buying a kit which comes with the hood, the lights, and the hang on the back filter just to get you started. And you don't want to run the lights all the time, right? Because if you run the lights all the time, then algae is going to grow like crazy. Well, the same thing applies when it's in direct sunlight. So if you have direct sunlight, algae is going to grow like crazy. You're going to have a green tank with green water, and that's just gross. So also make sure that when you're finding the place for your tank, it is not by a window, because we just do not want that extra sunlight. We want to prevent algae from growing as much as we possibly can, which it's inevitable, it is going to grow. But if you have your tank in direct sunlight, it is going to grow like crazy. So just make sure that when you find the place that can withstand the weight of your tank, that you do not have a window there so that it cannot get that extra sunlight from your window. So next, let's go on to tank setup. And with tank setup, we are going to be discussing, the substrate, the decorations, and also some of the equipment you will need inside the tank. So now, when I bought my fish tanks, I bought kits. And what I mean by a kit is that it came with pretty much everything that I needed. And it was a great beginning start to my fish tank hobby. So when I bought my 10-gallon fish tank kit, it came with a hang on the back filter, it came with LED lights and a hood, and the fish tank obviously with a net and some extra food that I didn't end up using, but nonetheless it came with food, because believe it or not, you will forget to buy food when you buy fish. And it was great. I paid about $45 for a 10-gallon starter kit, which is great, because filters and stuff can become a very, very, very pricey adventure. So one of the things to kind of keep you away from being scared off with money is just buy a kit. Just buy a kit. It comes with everything. You put it together really easily, and it's done. You could also go the route of just buying a tank separately. So you could either go on Craigslist and buy just a tank, or you could even go to PetSmart and buy a $20 10-gallon tank. Now, it comes with no hood, which kind of sucks. So if you have a cat, I would suggest buying a hood, which can run you like, I don't know, $20. You can also buy, then you'd have to buy a filter, which can run you a lot. So that's why I like going with kits, because then, you know, you get a filter for pretty cheap. And then, you know, you also have to buy a heater. And I would say regardless of what fish you're keeping, you have to get a heater just to maintain some sort of consistent water temperature. Also, just to add backup, just in case, you know, your power goes out, so that, you know, you're keeping the water at a certain temperature, and then when your power goes out, the water temperature falls a little bit, nothing is going to die. So that's why I would suggest grabbing a water heater regardless of what fish you're keeping. So now, what can you do for filtration if you don't want to buy a filter and you just bought an empty tank? Well, live plants. Live plants are filtration. So if you want to replace the hang on the back filter with some plants, go for it. There's some very easy growing plants. There's even some that really require no light, like Java fern, that you can get. So put those in the tank and you'll have some filtration. What I do is I actually run both. I have the hang on the back filter. Notice that, you know, they're not doing enough now because my bio load in my tanks is quite high. So I threw in some plants and now everything's fine. Everything's doing pretty damn good. But I do run out of water a lot, which we'll discuss later on. So now let's talk about the substrate. Substrate, if you guys don't know, it's like the gravel that gets laid on the bottom of the tank. So when I started, I had the Marina light blue and dark blue rocks. I went totally fake because I was not aware about how easy live plants can be to keep. So I bought very colorful rocks, and I regretted that within about a week. And the problem with that is I already had fish in there and everything was already put in place. So when picking your substrate, you need to consider what you want to keep, because now in my tank I have black sand and marina gravel on the bottom, but I also have live plants in there. So I wanted the sand so that I could, you know, plant the plants really easy, and then have you know, rocks on the bottom where the roots can kind of wrap around and just grab onto it, just so that they, you know, could stay in place. But that took a while to fix when, you know, I have a bunch of guppies in there, and, you know, I have to keep them in a bucket. So not only was I on a time limit for how long I could keep guppies in a bucket for, because this is like, you know, this old water I have to keep them in, but then I also have to remove all the rocks, toss them out, clean out the tank, and change the substrate. So when you're picking your substrate, ask yourself, do you want to keep live plants? Because if you do, I suggest running some sand with gravel on the bottom, just so that when you plant the plants, it's easy. Now, when cleaning the tank and siphoning out of the bottom so you can get all the poop off, you will lose some sand, but that's okay. You don't lose that much. I've been doing it. I haven't lost that much sand, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But it's more just, you know, just thinking about, do you want to keep live plants just to make your life easier? Also, the color for aesthetic purposes. If you pick colorful rocks, your fish are not going to stand out. And when I pick a tank and I look at a tank, I want the fish to stand out. So you got to think about what you want. So if you want to go totally fake like I did, go nuts. You have all the right to do it because it's not my fish tank. But just from experience, just letting you know, your fish won't stand out in very colorful rocks. So when you pick your rocks, I would normally pick a color like, you know, natural gravel or black or even dark brown, just like a darker color, so that they don't pop. Because you obviously want the fish to pop. That's the whole reason you're getting a fish tank. You want the fish to pop. You know, you want them to be the center of attention and not the rocks. So next up is the decoration and plants. And believe it or not, this is one of the most important aspects of a fish tank. Not only for aesthetic purposes, but also for the fish's well-being. So if you put in your tank one decoration, whether it be a castle, a plant, an Olaf, whatever, you will notice that your fish will gravitate towards that decoration because it wants to find cover and a safe space. And this is because fish have a natural instinct to hide because they are prey. Predators will eat them. So they need hiding spots. So when you design your fish tank aquascape, you need to consider hiding spots for your fish, even if you're only keeping one, because they will still want to hide. They don't know they're in a glass box. They need hiding spots. So this is why decorations are very important, because a lot of people don't consider that. They'll just put a bunch of things in and be like, oh yeah, whatever, we're fine. And then they'll wonder why, you know, Goldie is only hanging around the leaf. Well, that's the only spot of cover you gave it. So if you give it more cover, it'll come out more. I know it seems weird. The more decorations you have in your tank, the more your fish will come out to the front of the tank and feel safe. So when designing your fish tank, pick decorations that will provide cover, and also pick those things, like those joking things you want. Like if you want Olaf in your tank, go nuts, put Olaf in your tank, it's whatever, but make sure that you give the fish some places to hide, because it really will affect the fish's well-being in the end. The more decorations you have, the happier your fish will be. This will also help protect against aggression. As you guys know, I keep angelfish, and you could probably see them, getting really feisty. My one angelfish is getting bigger, and he is starting to get very aggressive. And this is not by any means the most aggressive angelfish I've ever kept. In fact, my first angelfish was a total dick, and he was very aggressive. He was ridiculously aggressive, but the more cover you give your fish, the easier it is to avoid this aggression. And it'll allow the angelfish to calm down, it'll allow your fish to calm down, and everyone will get along a lot better. So just provide cover, regardless of what kind of fish you're keeping. If you're keeping all calm fish, provide cover regardless, because they want it. All fish want it, so you need to provide it. And especially if you're keeping, guppies, if you're going to keep males and females and you're going to have babies, the more cover the better, so that the babies can hide, because the guppies will eat their own babies. It's weird, but more cover equals happier fish. And now to delve into something we already discussed, you need to decide whether or not you're going to go with fake or real plants. You don't even have to decide, you could do both. But it's actually harder, in my opinion, to keep fake plants than real plants. Your fake plants will be covered in algae in no time, and it'll be disgusting, and you'll be constantly rubbing it off and cleaning it. And it just becomes such a hassle. Eventually, it's just going to be stained and garbage. I find it easier to keep real plants. There's a bunch of real plants that you could keep. I keep wisteria. I have some Cambria. I think it's called Cambria, yellow Cambria in my tank now. I have Amazon swords. They grow in like no light. It's ridiculous. I have also in the valves. You can keep all that stuff. You can see the tanks obviously on the screen. So I will kind of like put arrows where everything is. And it's really, they're not that hard. You plant them, you make sure your water's okay, you put some lights in, you add some little I have some liquid fertilizers, which I will show you at the end of the video. And I also have some root tabs that I just kind of put into the ground, and I just leave it. And they don't get covered in algae. You can cut off the dead end. So, as the plant dies, they do in as you're gardening, you snip it off, done. Easy stuff. And they look better, and the fish can eat them. So my little fishies, nom on the Cambria and the wisteria, and then it gives the fry the hiding spots too. So my guppies, make babies like rabbits, and I have a bunch of babies constantly. So all the little babies hide in those plants, so the mommies and daddies don't come and eat them. So when you're deciding on real or fake plants, do not be afraid to go with the real plants, because if you kill it, you lost $3. It's not a big deal. You're gonna kill a lot of things in this hobby, and you're gonna have a lot of success in this hobby. So don't be afraid to try something. Do not be afraid. I'm telling you, fake plants are harder to keep than real plants. For the most part, there's obviously some real plants that are really hard to keep, but the easy plants that you keep are just as good looking as most of the more advanced ones. So it's not a big deal. So you can either go with fake or live plants. I would suggest just go with live plants right away. Just jump right into it and just start with that, because what you're going to do a lot in this hobby is be like, yeah, I'll upgrade later. Yeah, I'll do this later. Yeah, I'll do this later. Yeah, I'll do that later. Yeah. And it just becomes this dwelling thing that you are always going to do things later, and you never do it. So start off. If you want a big tank, get the big tank right away, because you're going to be like, I'll upgrade later. No, you won't. It's going to take forever. It took me months to upgrade to the big tank. By the time I upgraded to the big tank, my angelfish were gone. All my big ones. I ended up having to buy new angelfish. So go with what you want right away, because you're not going to upgrade later. So if you want live plants, if you want to learn how to do live plants, start right now. I will leave a bunch of links to a bunch of YouTube channels, a bunch of videos that help me learn about this stuff. So don't worry about that, guys. I'll have a bunch of things in the description too, because obviously I can't cover everything in this video. So I'm doing my best to cover as many things that I've learned throughout my fish tank hobby, experience, to help you guys get into it. And I'll leave a bunch of stuff down below that help me, especially with the live plant situation, help me learn how to keep all this stuff. So don't worry, I got your back on that. So remember, more cover Live plants provide filtration, and they're actually easier than the fake plants in my opinion. So it's up to you at that point what you want to do based on your design and your cover for your fish. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. Next is the supplies, and there are a lot of supplies that you need. We covered most of the tank supplies in the tank section. So you have the filter, the heater, and the hood, and the lights. So the lights and hood are especially important if you have, well, one, cat. You kind of need a hood because your cat may try to eat your fish. Luckily mine don't. But you also need lights because if you're going to keep plants, you need lights, and fish do like lights. Especially if you keep tetras, they will go to bed. They do fall asleep. So lights are great. But in this section, we're going to talk about like, you know, liquid supplies, as in like mixtures you could throw into the water to make your water better. And a lot of these are mandatory, in my opinion. It's not really in my opinion, actually. It's actually, you know, mandatory, especially some stuff like dechlorinator. So we're going to start off with dechlorinator. So if you're not using RO water, which for the most part you don't, for most fish, it is recommended they use RO water because it's obviously better than tap water. But I use tap water all the time and my fish are fine. But what I suggest getting, and by suggest I mean you have to, is a dechlorinator. So what this does is it removes a lot of the metals and chlorine from your tap water, and it'll just make it safer for the fish. You can't have chlorine in your tap water. You don't want chlorine in your fish tank because fish don't want to live in chlorine. So you just remove the chlorine using a mixture that you see on the screen right here. That is the one I use. It works very well, and I use it all the time. Every time I do a water change, I put that in the bucket. So make sure you have dechlorinator. You need it, especially if you're keeping a betta fish. They absolutely need it. And you know what, for any other fish you need it as well, because I've noticed that when I didn't do it in the beginning, my fish would have crazy fin rot, and that's just, you don't want that because you feel so bad and you just don't want it. So buy dechlorinator, avoid that situation that I had. Buy some dechlorinator, dechlorinate that goddamn water, and the fish will be happy, and so will you. It'll ultimately make less work for you later on. Next is food. Believe it or not, you are going to forget the food. You're going to go out and buy your fish, you're going to come home, and you're going to put them in the tank, and you're going to be like, forgot the food. I kind of need the food. So then you're going to have to go back. And I've done that so many times. I did that. I bought my goldfish, forgot the food. I bought my angelfish, forgot the food. Bought my girlfriend a betta fish, forgot the food. You just get so excited over the fish that you just want to go out, put them in the tank, and just stare at them for 7 hours throughout the day. But don't forget the food. Do not forget the food. There are a variety of different foods. I use this food on the screen. I use flakes, and I also feed them bloodworms sometimes. I know there's a betta fish on the bloodworms, but they eat it anyway, and it's pretty good. They do prefer the flakes, but you could also get pellets and stuff like that. And for any bottom feeders that you may want, which I suggest doing heavy research on that because I bought one and I had to unfortunately get rid of him because he grew too big and started sucking onto my other fish, trying to eat them. I feed them algae wafers, so some fish do eat algae and cannot just survive on the algae you have in your tank because they'll eat it all and then they won't have anything. So algae wafers are good to have for those fish. But I'm assuming for the most part you guys are going to keep fish that just require flakes. These are the flakes that I use and they love it. So don't forget the food. Next is a fish net. Now if you bought a kit, it comes with a net. Perfect. That net is tiny. That net is so small, my fish do not fit in that net. When I went to go get my bottom feeder out of my tank, because he was, trying to eat my fish, I had to use my hand. So I had to scoop up his head with the tank, with the net, and then I had to grab his tail with my hand because he didn't fit in the net. My goldfish doesn't fit in the net. My angelfish do not fit in the net. The only thing that fits in the net is the tetras. So even though you'll have that net, it'll last for a while. If you're keeping bettas, then that's fine. I suggest getting a bigger net because trust me, you will need a bigger net. Just get a bigger net. So one of the last mandatory items that I suggest getting is Melafix, and here's a picture of it. Some people tell you that this stuff doesn't work, and I will tell you that it works. This is Jesus medication right here. This stuff is amazing. This stuff, I use it for adding new fish to the tank. So after I add new fish into the tank, I'll use it for about 3 days and I'll just put it in the water. If I'm having any sort of fin rot, from a fish dying, because that does happen, you're going to kill a lot of things in the beginning, right? Because you're just learning. Don't feel bad because the pet store kills even more than you do. You're going to kill some things. Your ammonia levels are going to spike because they're rotting away, because they'll probably die at night when you're not there. So then you put that in when your fish's fins, kind of rot back and it'll heal them. And I find that it works very well. Some people are like, oh no, it's all the water changes. Well, when I use it, I don't change the water. I let that stuff just sit there. And it works amazingly. I'll show you a picture of Pyro, which is my fantail, which is, again, from my beginning mistake. He's still with my angelfish and stuff because I know exactly what's going to happen to him if I get rid of him. He's going to be tortured into a bowl, and I don't like that. So I'm going to keep him as long as I possibly can. But here's the tail, and where that red line is where his tail fell off. I had such bad fin rot because I didn't know how to clean the tank. It was bad. And I used Malefics because I was rushing. I was terrified. His whole right side, actually, where that tail fell off, the fin on his side actually fell off too, and that grew back. It was bad. It was really bad, and I used Malefics, and within 2 weeks, because it was so bad, it took about 2 weeks for it to fully heal. It came back, and I was amazed. I've used that stuff ever since. That stuff has saved me so much, and especially if you keep angelfish, their fins are eventually going to split as they grow up, I find. So one thing I've just noticed as a trend is all my angelfish, as their fins just get larger, it just kind of splits in half, and then within a day or two, it grows back. But the Malefics just makes it speed up faster. So buy Malefics. It is a little bit expensive. It's about $10 for the bigger bottle, but get it. It works amazingly. When you're adding new fish, use it. When your fish are experiencing fin rot, use it. Please, for the love of God, use it. And I even put it in every once in a while just to put it in, because you know what? It works. So I put it in every once in a while just to keep, it flowing through the water, just in case, there might be something going on that I can't notice. Next is aquarium salt. This is not table salt. Please do not put a table salt in your fish tank. This is aquarium salt. Now, you're going to be wondering, Tom, I'm keeping a freshwater aquarium. Why do I need salt? Well, salt helps with killing bacteria and ick. Ick is something that is in your fish tank regardless if you want it in there or not. There's nothing you could do to avoid having it in your tank. It is believed to be dormant in everyone's tank, so you can't really prevent it. Well, I mean, you can prevent it, but you can't really fully prevent it. It's going to happen regardless sometimes. When I set up my 30-gallon aquarium, I got ick, and I ended up losing one of my favorite angelfish due to ick, and it was because I didn't know what ick was. Throughout my experience with my 10-gallon, I never had ick and never got it, which is weird because ick is usually caused from high-stress situations, and I probably really stressed out the fish because I didn't do a lot of research before buying them, but I never experienced it before, so when I caught it, it was late. Now, what ick looks like is a bunch of white spots on your fish, and it's pretty much like a parasite. And once they're on your fish, there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait for it to fall off. But what the aquarium salt does is it actually stops the ick from reproducing. So then once the ick falls off your fish, it's gone. So I keep aquarium salt. I put it in my fish tank probably once every 2 weeks regardless, because after that ick outbreak, I'm terrified. I do not want to deal with ick ever again. Just because one, it's so ugly, and two, I hate losing fish. I really don't like losing fish, especially for something that I can control. So I could do a whole other video on how I fixed ick, but nonetheless, aquarium salt is very important for it. And I also put it in every once in a while just because, there might be something in that tank that I can't see and it hasn't done anything yet. So I just put in some aquarium salt, put it in a water bottle, put some tank water in the water bottle, shake it up, pour it back in, done. Life's good in the tank. Next, we're going to talk about Nutrifin cycle. Now, what I haven't mentioned yet is that when you put water in a fish tank, you actually have to let it cycle. Now, cycling means allowing the water to develop good bacteria in order to get rid of ammonia. It won't necessarily get rid of it, but it'll at least detoxify some of it so that your water doesn't become just a toxic waste pool of crap. So, this Nutrifin cycle stuff will detoxify ammonia for you if you so happen to put fish in before the cycle is complete. Now, I've also heard that Safe Start by API is fantastic, so you could also go with that, but it is possible to put in fish right away, but I would highly suggest waiting at least a week or two. At least. It usually takes about 3 weeks for the cycle to finish, but I would suggest just fill up the tank, leave it empty for at least a week or two before you even go near this cycle stuff, because if you don't have experience with uncycled tanks, don't do it, because you'll just kill all the fish that you just bought, because pretty much when they poop, they're poisoning their own water. So at least wait a week or two for some of the bacteria to develop, and then use this stuff while you finish off the cycle so that your fish do not have to sit in toxic waste pools of their own crap. And finally, this is the last thing that I use on a regular basis. It is called Nutrafin BioClear. Now, what is BioClear? Well, BioClear helps clear out the tank water when it gets cloudy. So what happens is when you start a fish tank, you're going to have cloudy water, and it is going to be a battle. It is called new tank syndrome, and you are not going to like it. It's ugly, doesn't look as good as a clear water would, and you will have no idea what to do to fix it. Now, what I do is I use BioClear, and it works pretty much every single time I use it. Now, in my 30-gallon aquarium, I have a little bit more difficult time making it work because I gotta use a lot more, and I just can't seem to usually get the right amount in there to clear it out really fast. But in my 10-gallon tank, no problem. Within like 2 or 3 hours, tank water's clear. Easy stuff. It's good stuff to use. It is expensive, which is one reason why I hold off on using it on my 30-gallon tank. I just kind of let it clear out naturally, which takes a little longer, but you know, I use it to kind of kickstart it a bit. But in like smaller tanks, you don't have to use very much at all, and it'll clear it up with like a snap of your fingers pretty much. It's amazing stuff. It works great, clears it with like good bacteria as well, so it's very safe to use in your fish tank. So BioClear, if you want clear water and you want to battle your new tank syndrome will affect you for months and months and months, and then eventually you'll be able to change the water, put new water back in, and it'll be clear. So that is one of the last things that I use on my tanks, and I don't use these every day either, by the way. These are used very, very rarely, usually once a week or during a water change. We are 30 minutes into the video, and we could finally get to the exciting part, the fish. So you now have your fish tank set up, it's working, it's running, everything's going well. Now it's time to put fish in there. Well, what I suggest doing when buying fish is avoid impulse buying. Do some research. Go look at some fish tanks. Go online. Go on YouTube. There's a lot of fish videos. While the quality of, their cameras aren't very good, they'll have some nice fish in there. Find some of the fish that you want to keep. One of the things that caught my eye was angelfish. I love the way they move, and I love the way they look. So I got angelfish. That's what I wanted to keep. But sometimes, that impulse buy bug is going to bite you, and you're going to buy something you shouldn't be buying. I bought a pleco because I needed a bottom feeder to clean up some of the algae in my tank. And I didn't do research on it, and I found out he can grow to 3 feet long. And my tanks can't obviously support that, so I had to get rid of them. So what I suggest doing before you buy a fish is do a lot of research on the fish. Find out how big it grows, because your tank needs to support the max size of that fish, not the small size, the max size. My 10-gallon tank can support a small size angelfish, not a full size angelfish. So make sure your tanks can support the full size of the fish you want. Do a lot of research on its temperament and its tank mates. Some fish are not going to go well together. I'm not saying some fish won't work together, but most of the time if a website says, hey, don't put a beta with another male beta, don't do it. I've seen it work, but don't do it. I wouldn't suggest doing it. Find out what tank mates work so that you can pick and choose what kind of tank mates you want with him or her. And make sure you just do a lot of research. Find out what food they like, find out how they behave, and all that good stuff. So if you want angelfish, I'll tell you right now, they're semi-aggressive. I've had some that are totally docile and will never touch another fish. I've had some that'll chase another fish around the whole tank until, it kills it. So be careful. Be careful with some of the fish you buy. You can get lucky. I suggest if you're going for angelfish, which a lot of you guys say angelfish are cool, so if you're going for angelfish, buy them small. Like, I'm talking like, their body's the size of a dime, kind of smaller, a quarter. Because at that point, they're not aggressive, and, you can work them in with your tank mates, and then after that, I find them fine. But if you buy them big, they're already territorial, they're already aggressive, and you'll run into some problems. So, if you're going for angelfish, buy them small. Small is the best. You watch them grow up, which is always fun, and they should grow up nicely beside your tank mates and not be as aggressive as they would if, they were larger. As we mentioned before, these are live animals, and you have to take care of them as such. You have to make sure you can provide them enough space. So if you can't provide enough space for an angelfish, don't get an angelfish, because you'll just end up killing it. And you don't want that. You don't want fish to die, obviously. And you especially don't want them to die when they're perfectly healthy, which will happen and can happen. Obviously, you are dealing with live animals, so sometimes, they're just going to die and they're just not going to live as long as they should, which isn't your fault. But, sometimes they die because you didn't give them enough space. So make sure when you're researching fish, make sure your tank can support it. Or even then, research what fish you want first and then buy the tank that can support it, just to make sure. So, some fish are also easier to care than others. Some fish, like discus, require a crazy amount of requirements. Like, you can't have any ammonia in your tank with discus. Like, you have to have your water perfect for discus. So is discus a beginner fish? No, absolutely not. Are goldfish beginner fish? Yeah, they can be if you have the space to support it. They're easy. I can't kill mine. Mine is amazing. Mine almost lost half its body and it's still alive. Goldfish are great, but goldfish are easy. Discus are hard. That's kind of the range here. Angelfish are okay. They're kind of, not really, I wouldn't say they're in the middle. I'd say they're more on the easier side, but a little bit more difficult than, let's say a goldfish. They require, regular water changes and, you have to clean out the bottom of the tank to make sure some of the poop is gone and stuff like that. But you got to make sure you understand how hard it is to take care of some of your fish that you may want. So you may want to work up to those. I'm not saying don't buy those fish. I'm just saying don't buy them right now. Just work your way up. I would start you with, a beta or a goldfish. You can even buy angelfish because they look cool. And, they're not too bad to take care of. And you can work your way up from there. Work your way up. Make sure you can make those live first. And then work your way up. Because you want to limit the amount of fish you kill. Because not only are you wasting your money, but then you also can end life of another being, too early. So make sure you do a lot of research. It's pretty much all you have to do is do a lot of research on the fish. As much as you possibly can before you buy it. It'll make your life so much easier on you if you know what you're going into rather than, plopping in your tank and then going, okay, now what? What am I going to do now? You can't do that. You can't be doing that. You're dealing with a living animal. Know what you're going into when you're getting into it. So that's my suggestion. Research, research, research. Strive for greatness too. Make your tank great. Make your tank great again. So that is pretty much it. Research, 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 research. Make sure you have all the supplies for that fish. Make sure you can support it and make sure you're ready to do some maintenance, which we're going to talk about right now. Now it's time to talk about maintenance. How much work am I going to have to put into this fish tank to make it look good? Well, there really isn't actually a lot of maintenance to it. It's just consistency with the maintenance. Now, I've had my old 10-gallon tank. When I had it set up, like my first time, I had to change the water, at least half of it, every 4 days. Because I had so many fish in there, the water would go to shit within 4 days. So what I suggest is keeping your bio load down low. If you're in a smaller tank, because fish are going to poop a lot, you're going to have to do more water changes. So that's why I suggest getting a bigger tank, because there's less water changes. So in my 30-gallon, I change about a quarter of the water every week and a half. And then I do a 50% once a month. And it works. Some tanks you might have to do more often. Some you may have to do it a lot less. My uncle's never changed his tank water and his fish are fine. It's weird. Some tanks require more maintenance than others, but as long as you're consistent and set up a work and it's something that works for you, you should be fine. So, if you want to do Sunday at 9 o'clock at night, do it. And to make things easier for you, there's a lot of things you can do. What I like to do is I like to fill up a bucket of water after I do a water change, and I leave it with a little strainer on top so some of the water can evaporate. And the reason I do that is because you can allow some of the chemicals that are in your tap water to leave before you even add in the chlorinator, and then I'll add a chlorinator in later. That way some of the water is already cycled too before it even goes into the water, and it's already at room temperature, so it's not going to change the water temperature too much in my fish tank. So that's something you could do to make your life a little easier when doing some maintenance. Now, what do I do on a daily basis? Well, on a daily basis, I'll get up, go get my coffee. I'll come downstairs, and I like to call it, I'm doing my live check, because I still consider myself a beginner. I'm doing my live check. I'm making sure everyone's good, making sure everyone's alive. I'll look in the tank, analyze my fish, make sure their behaviors are good, because guess what? Fish do have personalities, and you will know when something's wrong with your fish, even if their bodies look fine. Watch out for their behavior, because if something's changing, something's wrong. So, I look at my fish, analyze them a little bit, do a quick little check, boom, boom, boom. Everyone's live, drop some food in there. They're all happy. I'm all happy. Done. That's it. And then I'll feed them once before I go to bed. In my 30 gallon, I do 2 feeding times because I have some, more fish in there, and I have larger fish in there, so they do need a lot of food. So there's a little bit more competition for food, and I find that the more I feed them, the less aggressive they are, because my fish aren't worried about not getting enough food. And then in my 10 gallon, I only feed my guppies once, because one, I have plants in there, so they're often like munching on the plants all day. So if they're really hungry, they can eat the plants. I don't care. And also, a lot of the food ends up going to the waste because a lot of the fish are smaller, so they can't catch up to the flakes, and then once it hits the ground, they don't eat it. So it just creates rotting food, and that's just bad. That's just bad news for the water. So I feed them once a night, crush up the flakes a little bit, they eat them, they leave some on the floor, they'll go pick them up after. My shrimp will come in and clean it up sometimes, but that's what I do. So your daily maintenance is really just feeding and making sure everyone's alive and checking on them to make sure everything's okay, because honestly, overnight something can snap and just shit's gonna hit the fan. That's what it's happened multiple times to me. I went to bed one night, my angelfish was totally fine, woke up the next morning, he was dead. Turns out I had a massive ammonia spike overnight and he died. So, I don't know. Sometimes things can flip on a dime, So, make sure you just monitor behavior. It's really not a big deal. Usually it's fine as long as you can keep up with your regular maintenance. But if you miss a maintenance day, you can run into some problems because, your fish adapt to the water changes that you provide on those days. So, make sure every morning you check on your fish, make sure they're doing okay, check their fins. If you see a little bit of fin rot, which fin rot is when the fins start degrading back a bit and they look like they're almost ripping and, just like becoming smaller and like ripped, add some of that Melafix in and fix it right away. Don't let it get too far, and do a little bit of a water change maybe to change it. Now, we're going to go on to how to clean water, which is one of the final things I'm going to talk about. Actually, it is the final thing that I'm really going to talk about, is changing water. How do you change water? Well, for me, the way I change water is I take my siphon and I start the siphon by, shaking it up and down, and then it'll go into the water goes into the bucket. It'll pull out some water. Now, what you don't want to do is just leave the siphon in the air, like in the middle of the tank, because that's the good water. That's where all the fish are swimming. That water's fine. What you want to do is you want to start moving it up and down on the gravel and taking out some of the crap stuck in the rocks and some of the excess food and stuff, because that's the stuff that's rotting in the tank and releasing ammonia and making the water bad. So pulling out surface water is going to do nothing. It is going to do absolutely nothing. Don't do that. Leave that water in the tank. Pull out all the poop from the ground, and you'll be surprised how much poop comes out of there. You will be surprised. So that's what I want you guys to do when you're changing your water. Do not pull out surface water. Pull out water from the bottom. So grab yourself a siphon. You can even make one with a hose and a water bottle if you want, and seal it off with some silicone, or you can go to the store and buy one. Use that. For the love of God, don't do what I did, because that's how I had the fin rot fiasco with my goldfish. Do not pull out surface water. Pull out water from the bottom. So those are some of the tips, tricks, and equipment that I have for you guys. I hope I helped you guys a little bit. Obviously, I can't tell you everything because I'm just starting. So I'm going to link a bunch of channels and videos down below that can help you guys learn some of the stuff that I learned while going through it. The whole purpose of this video was to help you guys start thinking about some stuff and also tell you some things to make it easier for you so you don't have to go and figure it out. So just remember, guys, the bigger the tank, the easier it is to take care of. Bigger the tank, the more fish you can keep. And if you stay consistent with your maintenance, you should have a great time with keeping fish. So thank you guys for watching the video. If you guys would, please leave a like down below. Also, comment down below any of the fish that you are interested in keeping. I have no problem helping you guys research. If you leave a comment saying, hey, do you know anything about this fish? I will go help you research it, because guess what? I want to learn some new things too. You may show me a fish that I never seen before, and I may want to keep it one day. So thank you guys for watching the video. I'll see you guys next time on another fish video. So, good luck on starting your first fish tank. Goodbye.